Death row inmates have been making last requests for centuries. Some of the requests are mundane, while others are downright strange. So let's dive in and see what death row inmates requested, and if the correction facility obliged them. 9 of the strangest death row. Victor Harry Fager, 1935, March 15, 1963, was a convicted murderer and the last federal inmate executed in the United States before the moratorium on the death penalty following Furman versus Georgia, as well as the last person put to death in the state of Iowa. While the media did not pay much attention to Fager or his execution at the time, Timothy McVeigh's execution sparked renewed media interest in him. Authorities believe that Fager had kidnapped and killed Dr. Bartels in order to gain access to any drugs that Bartels may have carried to treat patients. Because Fager transported his hostage across state lines, federal charges were filed against Fager. In his defense, Fager claimed a drug addict from Chicago, whom Fager met in Dubuque, had actually murdered Bartels. Fager said he killed the drug addict and dumped his body in the Mississippi River. However, authorities could not find any evidence that this other person ever existed. On March 15, 1963, Victor Fager was executed by hanging in Iowa after being convicted for the murder of Dr. Edward Bartels. Fager chose a single olive with a pit for his last meal and hoped the tree symbolizing peace would sprout from his grave. Instead, officials found the olive pit in his suit pocket during burial. Margie Velma Barfield, née Bullard, October 29, 1932, November 2, 1984, was an American serial killer who was convicted of 1 murder, but who eventually confessed to 6 murders in total. Barfield was the first woman in the United States to be executed after the 1976 resumption of capital punishment, and the first since 1962. She was also the first woman to be executed by lethal injection. The first woman to be executed by lethal injection after the reinstatement of capital punishment, dubbed the Death Row Granny, Velma Barfield requested a bag of cheese doodles and a can of Coca-Cola as her last meal. James Edward Smith. James Edward Smith, October 19, 1952, June 26, 1990, was an American murderer who was executed for capital murder in Texas. His case garnered attention due to his unusual last meal request, a lump of dirt. James Edward Smith, the Texas killer they put to death in June 1990, wins the prize for one of the oddest last meal requests, a clump of dirt. Because dirt was not on the list of approved foods provided by prison officials, they denied Smith's request and gave him yogurt instead. Gary Carl Simmons, Jr., a grocery store butcher and a drug addict, Gary Carl Simmons, Jr., was convicted of the 1996 murder and dismemberment of Jeffrey Wolf and the rape of his girlfriend, who had come to his home to collect nearly a $20,000 drug debt. For his last meal, Simmons requested a 29,000 calorie meal consisting of pizza, Doritos, McDonald's fries, strawberry shakes, and ice cream, but he didn't finish the button-bursting feast. Philip Workman. On the day before his execution in 2007, Workman asked that a large vegetarian pizza be given to a homeless person in Nashville instead of having his last meal. The prison refused the request, but many others across Tennessee still followed through with his wish and brought hundreds of pizzas to local shelters for the homeless. Gerald Lee Mitchell. In 2011, Georgia resident Gerald Lee Mitchell didn't ask for a complete supper like others. Instead, he requested an assortment bag of Jolly Ranchers sweets. Peter J. Minial requested one of the planet's most enormous death row dinners in history. The 42-year-old asked for 20 beef tacos and beef enchiladas, 2 double cheeseburgers, a jalapeno pizza, and fried chicken. However, it doesn't stop there. The inmate also requested spaghetti, fruit cake, half a chocolate cake, and half of a vanilla cake, cookies and cream, and caramel pecan fudge ice cream, 2 Cokes, 2 Pepsis, 2 root beers, and 2 glasses of orange juice. Lawrence Russell Brewer, strangest of death row inmates, asked for an exorbitant last meal. 2 chicken fried steaks with gravy-drenched onions, a bacon cheeseburger triple meat with all the fixings on the side, 1 cheese omelet loaded with ground beef, tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, and jalapenos. The inmate's eyes were bigger than his stomach as he continued to ask for other things, like a massive bowl of ketchup-smothered fried okra, barbecued meat by the pound with half a loaf of white bread to sop it up, and 3 fully decked-out fajitas. Timothy James McVeigh, April 23, 1968, June 11, 2001, was an American domestic terrorist who perpetrated the Oklahoma City bombing on April 19, 1995. The bombing killed 168 people, 19 of whom were children, injured 680, and destroyed 1/3 of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. It remains the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in U.S. history. The Oklahoma City bomber asked for 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream as his final meal. Instead, he reportedly ate the ice cream alone in his windowless cell the night before he was scheduled to die by lethal injection. Why did inmates refuse their meals? Although there is scant data on death row inmates' culinary choices, we know that some have refused their last meal. In addition to the case in Texas noted above, Bundy declined his final repast. Some people speculate that there is a biological reason for this. Since the inmatee is facing death, there is no physical need for food or energy. And sometimes, it could be that inmates are just too frightened to take a bite. Perhaps it's even one last bit of defiance. People are fascinated with last meals, the tradition of allowing death row inmates. The last meal dates back to the early days of the U.S. criminal justice system. Many condemn the practice as a barbaric holdover from a more brutal era. Others argue that it is a humane way to comfort those about to be executed. Whatever your opinion, there is no denying that the last meal request is a fascinating glimpse into the minds of some of America's most notorious criminals. In the end, the inmate no longer has control over their life or death, but they can still exert some control over their final moments, and for that they are entitled to their last meal. What do you think? Should inmates get a say in their last meal, or is it a pointless gesture?